Hello and welcome to another edition of the Stench of Truth. I promised you an expose on the Kony 2012 situation, and I'm going to try to break it down for you very fast. First of all, Joseph Kony is the what would you call the antagonist in this entire thing, who leads the Lord's Resistance Army, which has engaged in child prostitution and slavery, as well as arming children for a guerrilla warfare campaign in Uganda and surrounding areas. Now, he has mainly been opposed to Museveni, who is the leader of Uganda, and one can see certain things here right off the bat. First of all, Joseph Kony is largely a non-entity these days. His force is rather small, and it doesn't seem as though he is much of a threat to anyone anymore. One needs also to consider that the United States under Bush and Obama have dedicated 3 separate actions in an attempt to try and capture or kill Joseph Kony. So one needs to look at what Kony is. Kony is a cult leader with a syncretistic religious system which involves elements of fundamentalist Christianity as well as some tribal beliefs, and he views himself, I guess, as a sort of messiah figure. Certainly, one thing right off the bat, Joseph Kony, evil. A very evil man, having things to do with children and using children in sex trafficking and slavery and the use of child soldiers. Absolutely abhorrent. Okay, but the fact remains that what are we supposed to do? You look at a video and it's designed to stir your emotions because children are involved, and yes, that is a terrible, horrible thing. But the fact remains that are we to then lose our senses and decide that military action is needed, even though Obama has sent into Central Africa military advisors? Does that sound a lot like Vietnam to you? They're not armed, but neither were the ones that were in Vietnam at the very beginning. So getting involved in Africa is something that the administration in the United States wants because they want to oppose Chinese involvement. Now, I'll give you a perfect example of this. Uganda under Museveni invaded the Congo, and the idea behind this was to oust Laurent Kabilla, okay? Now, here's a warmonger, Museveni, okay, who is systematically degrading the constitution of his country by having, going over the 2-term limit by constitutional amendments, which supposedly were done by popular vote, and, of course, being elected in elections that have been called into question as to their reliability and accuracy. In other words, vote fraud. And so Museveni invades Congo to oust Laurent Kabilla, and one needs to note that the action here is against Kabilla, who wanted to start a Marxist state under the auspices of, guess who? China. So what are we supposed to think in the United States whenever we see the supposed stalwarts of the liberal establishment like Angelina Jolie and other stars who like to talk big about, you know, very broad things that they don't have any knowledge of whatsoever, to make themselves seem like they understand what's going on in the world, that we're supposed to get all fired up about this evil thing that's going on here with Joseph Kony and his use of children, which I absolutely condemn. The fact of the matter is that he is largely inconsequential. The last action that was sent in to get him failed to capture him, but it did oust him from the place that he was in. 100 children were saved, and it appears as though his actual following is very small. So my contention is that we need not be concerned about this to the extent that we need to be aggravating for more war, because how do you solve death, murder, and destruction by adding death, murder, and destruction? I just don't understand the fucking equation, okay? Maybe if someone could explain that shit to me, maybe I would understand it, okay? I think, first of all, we should be doing something about Museveni, but well, he's a great ally to the United States because he stands opposed to China. And of course, that's who we're fighting against in Africa ultimately. Okay? So this is just an emotional attempt to gather support for a cause that can be tackled by means other than military adventurism and imperialism in Africa. So, in other words, it's a sham. It's a sham. The documentary's put out as an effect to gather emotional support for engaging in war or ramping up military activity to sort of provoke a response from the United States to go in there and get the evil Joseph Kony, who is evil. But one needs to also look at Museveni himself. As I said, here's a warmonger himself. Here's a person who is destroying his own constitution and undermining the supposed democracy of his country, okay, by being in his 4th term now, I believe. And there is also a connection with Museveni and a certain cult known as the family. And of course, the family is infamous for their flirty fishing techniques, which would use seduction and sex to get people into their cult. Now, one wonders if, in fact, this is the case, which it certainly appears to be by the evidence, how many children and what kind of sex trafficking are going on inside and around the Museveni government itself. So who's the real evil person here? Who's the most evil? The one that's in power? The one that invaded a nation? The one that is undermining his own country's constitutional authority? Or a guy living out in the woods with maybe a couple hundred people? You know, sure, he has kids, and God, if I saw him, I'd kill him myself, okay? But does that mean we need to get all mobilized for war and be all up in arms about this thing? No, it's a sham. Because who's the worst villain? The guy that's in power in Uganda, Museveni, or the guy living out in the bush with a couple hundred people? And that's the bottom line right there. Museveni's a bad guy. And, you know, going after Laurent Kabilla, and Kabilla supposedly assassinated by his bodyguards. Come on. That's a U.S.-Uganda operation all the way. You can't have anybody establishing a Marxist state anywhere in the world without the CIA assassinating them if they get anywhere near accomplishing their goal. And Museveni's activities in association with the family and some of the other things, the corruption and everything else that you would expect, make him a very dangerous and evil person. So if there were going to be any outcry, it would be to go in there and to overthrow Museveni, and then you can go out and root out what's left of Joseph Kony's, very small force. So basically, this is a sham. It is designed to evoke an emotional response, and of course it has amongst the so-called liberal stalwarts of Hollywood and the supposed liberal and supposed left-wing words that are largely meaningless today in this country. So, yes, Joseph Kony, or Kony 2012, a total fucking sham. Look into the history and find out the real facts, rather than looking at a documentary and coming up with some rather dubious conclusions. Thank you. Good day.